But we'd seen the consultant that morning, and he said, "Hey, I'll send my bill over later on." He sent his bill via email, and everything seemed fine as normal. A few minutes later, we got another email from him saying, "Oh, by the way, actually, do it to this. I've updated my invoice with new bank details. Everything's still the same apart from my new bank details." Oh, yeah. So the name was the same, but different bank details. And we went ahead and checked it. Everything looked fine. Paid the bill, and we were basically scammed. We lost £30,000 from doing that. And essentially, what transpired was that somebody somehow was reading all our email conversations, and they...
God, that's really, so sophisticated, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. So they immediately created the same invoice, but just with the details changed, on a PDF. And
how would they have done that? How would they have been able to track all your email exchanges?
Well, this is the thing I don't know.
Did you call the police, and how much did you lose?
£30,000.
And you're in finance?
Yes.
Whoa. Yeah. Well, this is what I asked for, but my heart goes out to you. It really does. What happened when you called the cops?
Well, we called the bank, first of all,
yes, of
because we thought the
might
bank...
be able to stop it or something.
Yeah, might be able to stop it. But essentially what I learned from that situation, one of the things I learned was that, as at that time, banks had no duty to check whether the sort code and account number for the person you're paying actually matched the name of the person being paid. It was not a requirement.
Okay.
So... I don't know if that's changed now, because it's about 2.5, 3 years ago.
They don't even look at the name quite often. You only provide the sort code and the account number, don't you, when you're doing a transaction?
Yeah, but in the end, we could not get the money back. It was gone. They did all it. They said they'd investigate. Obviously, they'd do something and come back and say, "Sorry, we can't help you." It's gone. So this can happen to any, this is very embarrassing, but this can actually happen to anyone.
Well, it's embarrassing up to a point. The point being that people don't realise someone is watching their emails. That was why I wondered what turned up, but nothing did. You still haven't got to the bottom. You don't know how that happened. But someone in IT will be listening and they'll say, actually, that is more straightforward than you think. It probably involves some sort of inside job, though, I would have thought. There'd be somebody somewhere who managed to access the... No?
Yeah, I don't know. It was just... There's very, very few people who work in that team. Yeah, so it's just highly unlikely. I mean, Anyway, we lost the money, and it was the first time I'd heard of an interception type.
No, and then it all happening so quickly and happening so speedily. Again, I mean, you wouldn't doubt it. You're in communication with the person. So you're looking out for things. Randomly unsolicited messages on your phone is very different to something that arrives in the middle of a conversation from the person that you think you're having the conversation with. Or the bank's fraud department rings you up while you're on the phone to the bank and they've just said, we'll get our fraud department to ring you. Or the COVID tests have just been stopped. The free COVID tests have just been stopped, and you get a message saying, you've got COVID, you need to buy some tests. I mean, all of this stuff goes on. Crikey. I might have to change my view about this as a phone-in topic. If you set it up right, it's absolutely riveting. One more, and loads more waiting, but I want to move on to something else next. That clip is apparently Boris Johnson in Manchester getting out of the car and running towards the hotel. So even I am not fully au fait with all the examples of Boris Johnson behaving in a despicable fashion, and I'm a world authority on the subject. Mark's in Leicester. Last word to you, Mark, and it'll have to be brief. What's it going to be?
Good morning, James. How are you doing today?
I'm good, mate. What have you got?
So I'm 22, and I left university into the pandemic.
Yeah.
So desperately looking for jobs everywhere you can find one, because at the time there was nothing.
Yes, of course.
So you start on your Indeeds and all your big sites, and you work your way through. And I got an acceptance offer from a company, fantastic, and they asked me to provide some details for it. They wanted a photograph of a passport, photograph of a driving licence. They wanted a previous bill that showed a national insurance number, and they wanted some other bits as well. So I've got a clearing account that I use, which is my old bank account.
Yeah.
So I put all those details in, sent it all off, and it was a massive scam. There was no job, there was no company. It was a fake interview, it was a fake everything, and yeah.
Did
there was
you
nothing
lose
in the
anything?
account. No, I just left uni. I had nothing.
Oh, I see. Because that account, you gave them access to an empty bank account.
Empty bank account, yeah.
That's just dumb luck, really. Although probably if you weren't using the clearing account, you would have been a little bit more on the ball, would you? Do you think, or not?
I think I would have been a little bit more on the ball, but it was more of a case of, oh my God, I finally got a job after uni, middle of the pandemic.
No,
yeah, fantastic,
I'm sorry.
Brilliant stuff. Yes, job. Woo.
This is the problem with having morals, isn't it? It's probably why it's so hard to understand Boris Johnson's behaviour as well, which I shouldn't have said. A few of you have pointed out. I shouldn't have gone from talking about Boris Johnson and then said back to scams, because it is very much a sort of similar theme.
James, all the way through university, I was conservative, blue T-shirts, buying the T-shirt packs, going around handing out stuff, going around to people. I don't want to be one of those unsuccessful people that leaves uni and moans about Brexit for 4 years. I want to be the Jacob Rees-Mogg. I want to walk around with a suit, earn a lot of money.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, what an absolute joke that was! Oh my God! I've been watching you now for about 2 years, and when I started, you watch it and you think this guy, he's just full of rubbish. Oh my God, he's just an angry lefty.
That's me.
But no, it's just ridiculous.
Well, I'd better late than never, I suppose, is the short answer. But the point about morals is that I can't quite imagine someone taking advantage of you in that way. Someone that's never met you, someone who is banking upon the enthusiasm that you just described and the desperation that you were enduring and thinking, that's the perfect opportunity to rip somebody off. And that's the problem you have sometimes. If you are, I don't know if cursed is quite the right word, but if you are cursed with any sort of moral compass, trying to analyse people who haven't got one at all is a really, really strange and difficult business. I shall add you to the list, Mark. I shall add you to the list of the gently converted. And thank you for the kind words. I don't know where anyone gets the idea that I'm angry from, though. I'm an absolute paragon of peacefulness and joy. It's 1 minute after 12. I noticed that as well. When he said, the last fella said, I've been watching you for 2 years. He means the YouTube clips as well, which have proved to be a very effective way of spreading the word. But it did sound a little bit menacing. I've been watching you, O'Brien. I've been watching you for 2 years. I enjoyed that a lot, if that's the right word to use. I had also enjoyed having my mind changed. It was not a dull hour of radio, was it? The sort of financial equivalent of saying, is there anybody old out there feeling poorly? Is there anybody? So we'll return to it, I suspect, because the levels of sophistication deployed there. In fact, there are still some mysteries that remain unsolved, particularly the one about the emails. And a pal of mine who is a bit of an expert in this field tells me that they have actually changed the rules on the confirmation of payee scheme. So that £30,000 that disappeared because they just put the correct name on a new bank account. You wouldn't be able to do that now, except for the fact that not all banks are members, and it's fairly clear. I don't think you need to be, I don't know, someone who flogs get-rich-quick schemes on the internet to know, not mentioning any names, Sebastian Fox. The people doing this, the people who are engaged in such activities, are quite likely to be the people who know exactly which banks do and do not sign up to those sort of protection schemes. Right, now, this is one of those conversations, one of those topics that regular listeners to the programme probably have sort of subconsciously filed away as me really allowing myself the occasional treat, although quite a few of you have mentioned it by text already this morning. In fact, you did, I think, correctly allude to it when when I just went off on a bit of a tangent about the professions and the fact that the only real jobs now in this country, in Britain, where the rewards are great, are jobs that involve money, moving money, trading money, investing money, dealing with money. The days of lawyers, for example, most obviously, because of the industrial action underway today. Criminal lawyers, the lawyers who deal with money, make a ton of money. You know, the big city fellas and women who do the big deals, the contracts, that's tons of money there. You're a good partner in a big city law firm, then you're golden. So that doesn't disprove my theory. The only people who earn the massive majority of people now who earn big salaries are going to be working with money. But even as you come down the ladder of remuneration, you will no longer think of people like bank managers even, but most obviously teachers, lawyers, some medical professionals, doctors and dentists. They're no longer going to be in a class apart when it comes to what they earn, which would be great if other people had caught them up at the top, but that's not the case, is it? It's as if unless you are working with money, then what you do is not rewarded in the same way again today. 8 minutes after 12 is the time. So here is a story that I think speaks to something similar, but I'm not yet quite sure what, which means you can ring in. Sheffield Hallam University has suspended its English literature course. I find this story chilling. I could be wrong, and we're going to dig into a little bit more detail now, but this is almost like the kind of equivalent of burning books in a way. Not the university, because they've done it amid pressure from government to ensure that graduates go straight into well-paid jobs. 2 other universities have announced planned closures of arts and humanities. The Lecturers' Union, the UCU, has said that jobs in those areas are also at risk at De Montfort and Huddersfield. It's Roehampton and Wolverhampton that are thinking of closing them down. Humanities subjects have fallen in popularity over the past decade. In English studies, you've gone down from 10,000 in 2011 to just shy of 7,000 in 2020. History and philosophical studies have gone down from 15,000 to just shy of 13,000. But this tale from Sheffield has seen the degree suspended because the university was, and I quote, responding to the government who will no longer fund degrees where 60% of students don't end up in highly skilled jobs. She told The Times, my main criticism is the government's narrow vision of what a country needs in citizens. This is astonishing. It's a consultancy team that was brought in by Hallam. English language was suspended in March, and areas like human geography are targeted as well. So the F word is one that we don't use enough, or rather we oscillate between using it too much and not using it enough, I think. There was a speech in the House of Commons recently which used the F word and pointed out the direction of traffic. There is a reason why fascists hate the arts. Okay, it's really simple, but I was well into my 40s before I worked it out. In fact, I think it was Donald Trump's election and the response of some of his supporters that made me realise what it was about. And I'm afraid there are similar feelings afoot in elements of the right wing in this country. There always are. The reason why fascists hate art or hate freedom of expression, genuine freedom of expression, they hate the humanities. It's not that hard, is it, to jump from hating human rights to hating the humanities? Is really simple. Because empathy is absolutely crucial to resisting fascism. If, for example, you are being encouraged to cheer the deporting of completely innocent people to Rwanda for the crime of wanting to enjoy freedom in this country, you can only do that by either not having or by turning off your empathy, your capacity for empathy. Because, as Tony Benn famously observed, if you want to find out, well, you can tell by how an administration treats refugees, how they would treat their own people given the chance. So empathy allows you to imagine what it would be like to be in that situation. It's something that I think is a crucial part of this program, even if you're talking about barristers, as we were today. It's empathy. You're trying to paint a picture that allows you to understand what it's like to be in somebody else's shoes. The reason the first hour of the program today was tricky is because it's not very easy to muster up sympathy for lawyers because of the baggage we all carry, which turns out to be false baggage. They don't all get paid a ton of money, and they're not. But do you see what I mean? So empathy for a homeless person. That's why a lot of right-wing rhetoric, a lot of popular Rupert Murdoch-style tabloid journalism always tries to give you reasons not to be nice, give you reasons not to have empathy. Why would you support someone taking industrial action? Why would you support somebody on unemployment benefit? Why would you ever be concerned about a single mother? because you have empathy. And the best business model in the British media since about 1969 has been the business model that not only gives you excuses to ignore your conscience, your moral compass, your empathy, but it also charges you for the privilege. So you go out, you buy the Sun, you pay your money, and they give you really careful and considered reasons not to give a monkeys about anybody else, whether it is striking railway workers, whether it is junior doctors, whether it's barristers, teachers, nurses, firefighters, police officers, whoever it is. You don't need to care about anybody except yourself. And of course, the most powerful antidote to that toxic approach to humanity is imagination. And the arts feed your imagination. They let you imagine what it would be like to be somebody else, whether it's Tom Sawyer, whether it's, Harry flipping Potter. Whether it is anybody at any point in history. The arts feed your imagination, and the imagination nourishes your empathy. It's what allows you to, it almost allows a degree of selfishness to inform a degree of kindness, because by imagining it happening to you, you muster up sympathy for the people to whom it is happening. That's why fascists hate the arts. That's why fascists hate the humanities. I don't know if that's part of the reasoning behind the government's determination to stop or limit or reduce the humanities, doing an English literature degree, because it won't necessarily lead to a, quotes, highly skilled, end quotes, job. But you tell me that a government containing people like Priti Patel and Dominic Raab and Liz Truss is not a government scared witless of empathy, scared witless of decency, scared witless of the humanities. They hate human rights. They're bound to hate the humanities. I don't get this story. I mean, ideally, an educationalist will be able to explain this to us. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. If you're waiting for the Secretary of State for Culture to come galloping to the rescue of culture, then my advice to you would be not to hold your breath. But I find this story really, really chilling. And all I've got for you this hour is this question. Do you? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. I could be wrong. That's why an educationalist might be able to give me some detail and say, actually, it's not quite as ugly as it looks. I find it terrifying that the government appears to be behind an attempt to limit the study of English literature. I mean, one imagines that the anti-woke brigade are going to be up in arms. They're trying to cancel books, lads. Come on, they're trying to or is it just statues that you care about? Not actual literature, but statues of right. I don't know. I find this story horrible. Truly, truly horrible. The Department of Education said decisions on courses available to students are regularly made by individual universities for many different reasons. Courses that do not lead students on to work or further study fail both the students who pour their time and effort in and the taxpayer who picks up a substantial portion of the cost. So they're not even denying it. Now, just by way of balance, I went to university when you didn't borrow money, really, to get through. It was all picked up by the taxpayer. And I do remember a bloke I worked with in Aquascutum in menswear during the summer holidays coming up to me and showing me his payslip and showing me how much of it went in income tax. And it wasn't a very good-natured exchange. He was quite angry and he said, "Why am I paying for your degree? I didn't even go to university." And at the time, I remember thinking that was actually quite a powerful point. And part of me still does, but the world has turned, okay? And the proportion picked up by the taxpayer is a fraction of what it used to be, and the loans that you take out are huge. So what's going on? How does this work? You'll need a degree of qualification to address those two questions. 0345 6060 973. And then you've got to stop it sometimes. You've got to stop that internal dialogue that goes, "Oh, don't use the F word. That can't be that bad. This is Britain. That stuff wouldn't happen here." Why the hell would a government want fewer people to study English literature? Let's go further. Why would an English government want fewer people to study English literature? 0345 6060 973. Do you find this as potentially chilling as I do? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. It's 12:17. It is 19 minutes after 12, and it is, I think, a terrifying development. And I don't use that word lightly. English literature is being suspended as a degree at an English university amid pressure from government. 03456060973 is the number you need. Alan is in Sheffield. Alan, what would you like to say?
Well, I agree with you, James. It's an appalling decision. I used to work at Sheffield Hallam. I retired about 4 or 5 years ago, and the direction of flow was exactly this. I mean, basically, the universities, both old and new, are big businesses run by poor business people.
Right.
And they make these kind of decisions because they're actually making very short-term decisions. They respond too quickly to government pressures, and they see themselves as very successful enterprises when if you actually look at the balance sheets and if you look at the student experience, it's anything but.
But you can't measure the student experience in pounds, shilling and pence, can you?
No, you measure it in terms of smiles and how much they feel they've actually benefited from being taught.
And then you need to explain to my former colleague in Aquascutum on Regent Street why he should be paying for those benefits that he never enjoyed.
Well, exactly, but if we're going to go down the Boris Johnson idea of a well-paid, skilled workforce, you only get that in the modern era by teaching a whole variety of skills.
You'd think that was obvious, right? You'd think that was obvious.
Well, I mean, I've listened to your show quite a lot, and, the obvious actually doesn't work these days, does it? Right. I mean, I used to teach politics for a living, and I retired partly because I didn't understand Brexit and Trump, and I don't understand the world now, where we end up with a clown like Johnson in charge.
No,
but, I mean, on universities, I mean, I was educated in the 70s, full grant and all the rest of it. And I feel very, very sorry for students today. Unlike some of my contemporaries, I think students have a very, very hard deal. And young people have a much harder deal than I did in the 70s.
Yes, I agree with you.
Yet people don't realise that. They're paying a phenomenal amount of money. And even in the post-COVID era, they're paying for PowerPoints on a big screen. They're not getting the human contact.
That's a slightly different topic, and I appreciate you've got your areas of interest, and I don't disagree with you, but it's not relevant to this to the bones of this conversation that we're having here. Is it? I mean, I would say that this was anti-education.
Well, yes, it is anti-education because what you're teaching also is you're teaching less and narrower rather than wider. How long is it going to be before there isn't going to be many philosophy degrees outside?
That's already on the list, and I've got a philosophy degree, and I can see why some people find it luxurious. And my late father always used to joke that he didn't see many postcards in the job centre window with the word philosopher on them, but look, here I am doing philosophy every day. Who'd have thought it? Here's the question I want you to answer, and pause if you want, especially given your background as a politics teacher. Why would an English government want people to stop studying English?
Because they're not interested in people having alternative ideas and having the confidence to challenge the establishment. I mean, one of the things that I always argued with my students is that, I'm wrong 99% of the time. I happen to be up here because I've read more books than you. But your ideas are more relevant than mine, particularly towards the end of my career when I was 40 years older than the people I was teaching.
Yes.
I think it's challenging authority is crucial for a healthy democracy.
Just critical thinking. So then you lead me inevitably to the question, why would a government want a less educated population? And that's almost rhetorical.
Well, exactly. I mean, Sheffield University, our neighbours up here, they've been closed down their archaeology department, one of the best in the world.
Yeah,
one of the best in the world. Actually, I'm old-fashioned. I actually went on a demonstration to support my former colleagues, even though it's a different university.
Sure.
And it was tragic. The young people there, the academics in their 20s and 30s, who were doing world-class research, and it's being thrown out of the window because of a balance sheet, and a university that's lost lots of money across the world is making up for it by closing an archaeology department.
Well, I mean, there may be an inevitability to the numbers. It may be that the financial scenario is less sympathetic to our position than we would like, but in other words, that there is a grim inevitability to it. But it has to be driven by policy. It has to be driven by priority. And the idea that, I mean, I'm only sort of half joking. You would expect people who claim to be deeply protective of British, people who claim that their culture is under attack. These chicken lickings running around the place. It was Muslims for a while, but they don't seem to be telling us all that the world is about to be overtaken by Sharia law at the moment. And now they've moved on to woke. It's woke people who are trying to take over the world, and they're trying to destroy our culture. You've literally now got a university in England suspending the teaching of English literature in response to government policy. If that is not an attack upon your culture, what is? A theoretical piece of graffiti appearing upon a statue of Winston Churchill. That is an existential threat to British culture. An English university suspending the teaching of English literature, that's absolutely fine. Because when I say culture, I don't actually mean culture. I mean really, really lazy debating points or really, really lazy provocations for people who don't like thinking. 24 after 12. Thank you, Alan. Josh is in Warrington. Josh, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Firstly, big fan, mate. Thanks
Thank
for all
you.
the stuff you do on the show.
Oh, you're very kind. Cheers.
So I did an English degree, and I was that plonker who also stayed on to do a master's at the end of it because I didn't know what to do with myself. And I'm now in, without sounding like a plonker again, quite a high-paid job that's got nothing to do with English.
Yes.
But I firmly believe that 4.5 years of critical thinking, reading literature from not just our own country, but Russia, France, Germany, debating with people in class, being exposed to the whole rigmarole has firmly given me the skill set that's allowing me to have a high-paid job now. And I've got friends and family in college where tutors, even pre-uni, are actively discouraging people, although using clever language to not make it overtly discouraging,
Sure.
from doing not just English lit, but also the broader humanities in general.
But these people did, history and classics at Oxford in large part. Simon Cooper, the Financial Times columnist, new book, Chums, talks about this in the most sparkling of ways, explaining how Brexit has its roots at Oxford Union debates in the 1980s. They all did these sort of degrees. So how could they... It's madness. How could they... I suppose Boris Johnson might be an argument against not doing classics at university if you want to actually be useful. But I suppose the Prime Minister not a highly skilled job anymore? Not when he's in the role. I'll ask you the same question. Why would a government want a less educated population?
I wonder if there is some poorly evidenced correlation between humanities degrees and jobs that deliver value for people or the broader economy or the country.
Money.
Yeah.
Seems so funny.
It does, but then you've got people like myself who, again, I don't want to sound like a plonker.
No, you don't sound like a plonker. I promise you don't. But I understand why you're self-conscious about that. Just because you've got a well-paid job doesn't mean that you're sounding smug or boastful, because you also acknowledge that your degree in English literature, even if you didn't have a well-paid job, it still would have been of immense value, just in a less measurable way, a less obviously measurable way. And I don't think I'd have this job if I hadn't done the degree that I'd done. And the degree that I did on paper was absolute bobbins, flipping philosophy. I think there was a pub in about 1991, a pub in the Lake District was advertising for a philosopher on about 150 quid a week. That's the only job at advertisement I've ever seen that would have been specifically tailored towards a degree in philosophy. But it's nuts, this. What do they want? An army of... What do they want us to do? Or do they not want us to go to university at all? Do they want university to just become a preserve of their own children?
Exactly. And university, without going too meta here, the whole point of it is a place where you meet people who are different to you, articulate those views, learn something, defend something, and hopefully come out a little bit better at the end of it. And I think humanities are a great arena for that. And I was at a wedding a few weeks ago, actually, up in Scotland, and one of the guests there, who was a friend of my partner's, was an engineer, nuclear engineer, ultra bright, very physical maths, but he did a philosophy degree. And I got chatting to him and said, how on earth did you go from philosophy into that? And he said, well, it's all about abstract thinking and rationalising points before you get to the right conclusion. So he said, obviously I don't think about Nietzsche when I'm doing my blueprints, but,
he thinks about taking everything to pieces and putting it back together again to see how it works.
150%, mate. Yeah.
You can tell you haven't got an economics degree. Thank you, Josh. It's 12:28. Lovely stuff. Fox is in Genoa. Fox, what made you pick up the phone?
Morning, James.
Hello.
I'm sitting here. I'm a retired lawyer, but I'm Dutch, and I worked for international companies, and particularly in the computer industry, for many, many years. And I always hired, and I lived in London, and I lived in England for a long time. But from there, I hired European lawyers, a lot of them English.
Yes.
And why would I, or British, Why would I hire a British lawyer? Because often they had done humanities and then took a law degree afterwards. And I particularly liked people who'd done that, so that I know that as an in-house lawyer, you need to have the law, and it has to be changed. So your modicum of law is never enough to be able to do the job in an international environment. So a lot of the work you do is actually how you deal with people. So humanities and literature, English literature for one, are of vital importance for people to be able to see over the border. It's just
what a beautiful turn of phrase.
Life.
Yes, of course. I mean, that see over the border, to understand life from other perspectives.
Well, so read Nietzsche, read whatever you say.
Sure.
My son read English literature at Goldsmiths and then went on to work and, of course, went into what it is, computer software.
Wow.
And who is he working for now? An Estonian company. Estonia, as you know well, is very hot on IT and on everything, on software development. Everything in the country, I think, is done by IT challenges. And he works there and does an international job with them, is in sales, which has nothing to do with his training.
But he's better at it because of the skills that he's learned. You tell me why you think any government would want a less educated population or to denigrate humanities in this way. What if they were here and you asked them to justify?
It's totally what you say. It's the big F word. Of course it is. It's burning books, and it's what, I hate to say it, but it is what your current government is doing, and it hurts. We listen to you more or less since COVID every day, and the hell of it is that Boris should go, and I wonder if the Conservatives can even get it back, but of course you shouldn't be limiting your universities.
Study less humanities.
What have they done with Brexit?
Study less English. It's nuts, isn't it? It is. Sometimes
it's ridiculous.
And of course,
it really is.
I use the F word reluctantly, but you are, of course, calling today from Italy, so I'm sure you, like me, do so with great caution. But this is what fascists do. They limit the education of the population in the hope of limiting the imagination, in the hope of outlawing empathy. Might be a coincidence. There might be other reasons for it. Fox, you've made me a little late for the news. I apologise for moving on, but Amelia Cox is here now with your headlines. 12:32 is the time. The more we talk about it, the scarier it becomes. I really do. Why would an English government, and I think the next call is in Belfast, so I'm using the word English advisedly, why would an English government want to suspend the teaching or reduce the teaching of English literature, especially a government that's supposed to be embarked upon a culture war to defend British culture? I'll take your answers to that. It's a semi-rhetorical question, and the F word has reared its ugly head today, because this is what... So I can say this is what fascist governments would do. This is the sort of thing that fascist governments do. I'm not saying this is a fascist government. I'm literally not saying that. But this is what a fascist government would do. What do we want? Less humanities, less human rights, fewer freedoms. Whoa. Pat's in Belfast. Pat, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James. It's the second time speaking to you. You helped me through my PhD, and I graduate on Saturday, so thanks for that.
Hey, well, it's Dr. Pat in that. It's almost Dr. Pat then. I shall adjust my records.
About ability grouping, but here I am again as an English teacher.
James, I remember
I always told my pupils the difference between history and literature. History is like, imagine it's like a floodlit.
Guys, it's a terrible phone line, Pat. I don't know whether can we improve it at all? How's that?
How's that?
That's a bit better, yeah. Thank you. Carry on.
Okay, I used to say history is like, compare it to a floodlit stadium, and literature is like a laser beam because it focuses right in on how an individual is impacted by history. Yeah. And so governments don't really want you to focus on the individual, particularly when they're not doing very well for individuals. You know, literature speaks to, Charles Dickens' Hard Times. The first line of it is, "Now what I want is facts. Teach these girls and boys nothing but facts." You want to eradicate imagination, eradicate the sense of imagining a better life for yourself, and really create pliant workers. That's what it's all about, James.
Yeah, I mean, I wish it wasn't clear. I wish it wasn't. What I mean is, I wish there were alternative answers to the question of why any government would seek to do this, why they would seek to be devaluing the humanities, devaluing literature, devaluing culture, devaluing art, but they just are. Even though it's good enough for them, they can do it, their children can do it, it's not good enough for everybody else.
You've quoted Animal Farm on the programme before, and in Animal Farm, Boxer is the horse, and he's not the cleverest. And what he does is, rather than think through what the pigs are doing to him, he adopts the maxim, Napoleon is always right. I think you've had a few of those people on your show.
Yeah, they don't ring in as much as they used to do.
They don't get on your show anymore.
No, they're more. I wish they would get on the show anymore. They don't. They tend not to ring in anymore. They usually wait for someone else to be in the chair, or they just confine their contributions to tweets from accounts with lots of numbers and bulldog avatars. But here we go. I mean, what are you going to do with your PhD?
I don't know. I think I might write, do some writing, and hopefully get published.
Fantastic.
Make a bit of noise.
Yeah, why not? Well, good luck with it, and congratulations. It's a proper lift you've done there, and I'm delighted to have played a tiny part in keeping you company during that period. Now, actually, I'll show you what critical thinking is, and it's a bit self-aggrandising this, but you're used to it by now, and you know I only do it. At least 52% in jest. So I don't know if you were listening on Friday when Rachel Venables played us the results of her remarkable interview with Jacob Rees-Mogg. Jacob Rees-Mogg, of course, spends his every waking hour now looking for benefits of Brexit, and has so far come up with absolutely diddly squat, although he would point out something that he doesn't understand about electrical appliances, something that he doesn't understand about vacuum cleaners. And on this occasion, and fish fingers play a role somewhere, because that's what everyone voted for. And on this occasion, he thought he'd stumbled across something worthy even of mentioning. Imagine that, you're being interviewed about the benefits of Brexit, the laws that you're going to change, right? You're being interviewed about that by one of the best journalists in the country on national radio. And you knew it was coming. You had plenty of time to prepare. So you're going to have a real humdinger of an example ready, right? So when Rachel Venables says to you, so what sort of laws is it that you think that we might be repealing? You're going to have an absolute zinger. It's going to have those moaning metropolitan elites like James O'Brien weeping into his muesli. And this is indeed what he came up with.
In and of itself, it's completely trivial, but there is a law that requires in tunnels, so if you go through the Dartford Tunnel, there have to be signs saying how you get out of it every 25 metres. But in this country we use yards for road signs, so the signs say 121 yards in one direction and 1152 yards in the other. We've got very funny numbers, and this is all because of an EU regulation hitting UK law and coming up with an odd answer.
Now, not only has he once again demonstrated a complete ignorance of both his brief and the broader issue, he's also once again being, and I think we can say unintentionally on this occasion, I don't know if you can defend him insulting everybody who died in the Grenfell Tower tragedy. I don't know if you could call that unintentional, but on this occasion, once again he's waded into a horrible event to make cheap political points without realising just how despicable his behaviour was. Because after Jacob Rees-Mogg said that to Rachel, and we played it out on Friday's programme, I was contacted by Christian Schmidt, who's the Director for Land Transport in the EU Commission. And Christian was keen to point out two things. The first is that it's a directive, which means member states have flexibility in how to implement it. Rachel touched on this on Friday. So 25 metres or less is the indications that you must have how near you are to an exit or the end of the tunnel, 25 metres or less. So when it's been translated into yards, there was absolutely nothing to stop us from having it in a nice round number. As long as it was 25 metres or less, it doesn't matter how many yards you choose. So you could go for the nice round number as near as possible to 25 metres. Off the top of my head, I don't know what that is, because I'm very much a metric man. Or a yards man, but not enough to translate between the two. So he was completely wrong about that. But do you know why the directive was introduced? No. It was introduced after, I don't know if you remember the fire in the Mont Blanc tunnel, where it was felt that lives could have been saved if there had been clearer indications of where exits might be, that there would have been, I mean, it's hard to say precisely how many, but the idea that Jacob Rees-Mogg has waded into a European Union directive framed in the aftermath of the Mont Blanc tunnel fire and designed very specifically to save human lives is, I mean, if it was anyone else, you'd think that it couldn't have happened, wouldn't you? But with him, you just think, yeah, whatever next. 24th of March, 1999, 39 people died when a truck caught fire in the tunnel. And in the aftermath of that, the European Commission introduced a directive, which means, as I've just told you, it is up to member states how they implement it. There's a degree of flexibility. And when asked by Rachel Venables for one example of a law worth repealing or worth changing, he came up with a law that doesn't need to be repealed or changed, that was not even a law in the strict sense of the word, it was a directive, and that was introduced in the aftermath of a fire in a tunnel that killed 39 people. I'm going to say that again, because even with Jacob Rees-Mogg, it's worth reminding us just how awful the ruling class currently is in this country. So he had, with days' warning, an opportunity to tell Rachel Venables the best example he could think of a law that we were party to as a consequence of European Union membership that he would be able to repeal now that we're no longer in the European Union. Crucial point here, I think, is that he had days of warning before this happened. That was the day that he announced his ludicrous dashboard. So he knows he's got to get his ducks in a row. He's got to come up with a brilliant example. And he came up with this example. Laws that we can repeal now we're not in the European Union anymore. Problem number one, it's not a law. It's a directive. Problem number two, the way it was implemented in this country, which is the grounds for his complaint, was an entirely optional choice. And his complaint about the clumsiness of the numbering could have been rectified yesterday. But I think most despicably, not even bothering to find out where the directive had come from or why the directive had been introduced, because if he had, he'd have known that it was brought in after 39 people died in a tunnel between Italy and France, and the thinking was that with better signposting and better labelling of distances, lives might have been saved. That's Jacob Rees-Mogg for you. Now, why would someone like Jacob Rees-Mogg want the population to be less educated? Answer, because they wouldn't faff about finding out pesky details and facts like that. Perhaps. It's just a theory. Sam's in Edinburgh. Sam, what would you like to say? Back to the studying English question and why any government would want to reduce it.
Yeah, hi, James. I think there's two issues. I think one of them is that they're probably really kind of vaguely aware that some of the things you do study when you do English are kind of really transformative. And they're not, I mean, you don't just study English literature. You don't just read Dickens or Eliot or Jane Austen. You also read things that, you know, kind of really open up your point of view. The most amazing thing that I read was a book called The Lonely Londoners by an author called Sam Solvon, which is about the Windrush generation, basically young men.
Oh, no, I don't want you studying that, mate. Oh, no. Oh, no, sorry. Next.
I know, but I mean, I consider myself like, I'm fairly well read, and that's why I wanted to do English literature, but it's not a book I would ever have come across or thought about. And it was just genuinely one of the most amazing things I've ever read in my entire life. Sure. And I think it's texts like that, which I don't think they're super aware of them, but I think they're kind of dimly aware of them and afraid of people having their mind opened up or kind of experiencing any kind of empathy, like you said.
And it is there, and it gives you just insights and ideas. And some people don't want that. I do understand that, but you're never going to change them. People who have decided that they don't like thinking and they want to live a life of atavistic impulse and reflex, but to try to take it away from people who do want it is incredible, really, for a government at this stage in history with with our culture. And I'm not someone who thinks our culture needs defending usually, because I'm usually being told it's under attack from people who aren't attacking our culture. They're just craving more history and more information, more knowledge, more facts. But this is a direct example of them doing precisely the thing that they pretend the culture wars are designed to avoid and address. It's nuts, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another factor was that it comes from like huge complacency and privilege. I mean, so many of their offspring will be tapped into that system of kind of privilege and, doing favors for each other and nepotism. And 6 months for them will seem like an age to get a job. But if you're an English literature applicant, or for many other degrees, 6 months is nothing. Not when every job has got 200, 300 applicants.
And that's not going to get better anytime soon. Do you remember, Sam, because you're in Edinburgh, which is it's nearer to St Andrews than I am. Do you remember what William Windsor did at university?
He did, I think it was English, wasn't it? English and something else, maybe?
I thought it was history of art.
I think that's what Kate Middleton did.
Did they not do the same thing? I could.
Maybe
I'll check, because these things matter. But I don't imagine anyone's going to be condemning him for doing a subject that doesn't necessarily lead to a highly skilled job. It is 12:46. 12:48 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. William did history of art, but changed to geography, which is also under threat. Under the government demands that degrees which don't immediately lead to highly skilled jobs are in jeopardy. It follows English language, which was suspended in March and was targeted alongside areas like human geography. 12:48 is the time. Joe is in Manchester. Joe, what would you like to say?
I personally think that they're just trying to create Tory voters of the future. I think when you go to university...
But I know lots of Tories. It sounds like the beginning of a shaggy dog story. That's not fair, actually. There's loads of people who might vote Conservative who also love reading books.
True, but I think if you look at it as a mass population, I think when you go to university, it does broaden your thinking. You do network with people that you would have never ordinarily met through your everyday life. You also start thinking about things more on a collective level rather than individualistically, and you just see how the world kind of hangs together. And that's not to say you can't get to that point by not going to university, but I think in terms of how people vote, I think if you vote from an individualistic viewpoint, you typically do vote Conservative because you think you're better off. Whereas if you think more from a society and collective perspective, there are people who might individually feel financially better off by voting Conservative, but look at the tactical voting. People chose to vote Lib Dem or vote Labour for the greater good, and I just think in terms of turning off some of these courses, it's trying to close down that kind of thinking.
So here's the thing, right? And this is me being more conscious of my own conversations than yours, is because you're not sounding condescending, right? But I sometimes do. I'm very conscious of that. I try not to, but Rome wasn't built in a day. So here's the thing. I like your theory, but it portrays people that you would loosely describe as being left-wing as being in some sense morally superior, right? We'll agree on that.
Yeah, I wouldn't say morally superior, but I
don't like the phrase, but that's what I'm doing as well. That's what I'm doing as well.
Certainly to lean on the empathy side of things, I think, to be able to walk in other people's shoes.
I think you can say people with empathy are morally superior to people without empathy, or people who engage their empathy are morally superior to people who don't. I've avoided the left-right divide, except to go for the extreme of the F word, of using the F word. But again, I don't think you're condescending, because the point I want to make is that unless someone's got a better answer, then actually it's the people who've introduced this pressure, it's the government that have brought this pressure to bear on academic institutions who must be subscribing to the school of thought that people who less educated people are more likely to vote for them. So we need to just flip it on its head to drive it home.
I also think that in terms of, somebody doing a degree course like in English doesn't have to go into a career in English. And I think, what someone was saying earlier about people skills, I mean, there's something like 870,000 open vacancies in the digital and tech sector, and you don't need a degree in computer science or be brilliant at maths to enter this marketplace. But it's almost like, how do you show that somebody can do English, which is their passion, and they can manoeuvre into different career paths?
No, I know.
But it's almost like when you can't see it, you can't be it. And I just think the government's really failing young people.
Also, how are you going to get people angry about nonsense if they've actually got a little bit of knowledge and a little bit more education themselves? How are you going to persuade people that... So there's a story about Dickens in the news today. Joe, thank you. I don't know if you've seen it, but I think we might have to cancel Charles Dickens because it turned out that he was passionately opposed to slavery. And as we all know, You're not supposed to point out that people were passionately opposed to slavery in 1850 because it was a different time then. It was a different moral framework. And it's ridiculous to judge people according to what happened back then. And it's absolutely fine to leave up statues of slavers all over the country. But as long ago as 1850, Dickens was writing against the horror of slavery, which he called an atrocity. So, you know, how are you going to persuade people that they're under attack from non-existent forces of woke if they are actually up to date and educated enough to know that they're not under attack from non-existent forces of woke? There's a lot to chew on here. It's a worry, isn't it? Laura is in Romford. Laura, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I love the show. I've spoken to you before, but I always end up bringing in about English teaching. I'm an English teacher.
Oh, that's...
and I'm in my classroom currently on a free period, and I'm horrified by this. I really worry that this is going to be a class. It's going to be a class divide, basically, where I can see a situation where the old pollies end up having to drop this subject and it becomes something for the rich. And
is that an element I'm missing? So Sheffield Hallam is in that category, is it?
Yeah, Sheffield Hallam was an old polly.
So if you want to do the humanities, you need to get into a Russell Group university or something like that.
And I think that for the sort of poor, like working class kids that don't know the system, you know, often end up in Old Poly. Not that there's anything wrong with them. I did my undergraduate degree at an Old Poly, but I worry that we're going to be put into these boxes where working class kids have to do useful degrees in inverted commas and end up where we have this class divide where you can only study something like English literature, which is so essential for everyone. You know, there's a reason that it's at GCSE. Everyone needs to be studying this, but it's going to end up with only the richer and the more privileged able to study it. And I can see where it's going, and it's horrifying.
I think you might be right. And so, I mean, I'm going to be the devil's advocate again. The notion of extending humanities degrees to parts that they never previously reached before without any guarantees of the quality of teaching. I mean, could there be a rationale here, even if we don't like it, that it could be that you're doing these young people a disservice by encouraging them to take out huge amounts of debt for a degree that is not going to be much use to them in the workplace? Because it isn't from a university whose degrees, humanities degrees, necessarily constitute a sort of golden ticket of some sort.
Yeah, perhaps, but the skills they're teaching, I think it was the last caller or maybe the one before said, like, so many people end up in jobs that are not related to their degrees, but their degrees come in useful. You know, it's not about... it's not about just going in and finding a job that's directly related to your degree. For a lot of people, you know, I'm doing a job that is directly related to my degree, but I know a lot of people that aren't. You know, it's
that's the point, isn't it? And that I mean, it's all the stuff you take outside of the workplace, all of the stuff that is part of who you are, part of the character forming or the leading out that education is supposed to provide. That's what it means literally, I think, from the Latin. To lead out. Thank you, Laura. James, you make a great point and speak eloquently of empathy and then use the decisive and condescending term anti-woke mob. I think that's a spell check predictive texting of me derisive. Can't you respectfully address those who have a different opinion to your own? Don't be such a muppet. Honestly, what do you think anti-woke means? Unless you're using the word woke as a pejorative, in which case I'm not talking about you. And if you are using the word woke as a pejorative, then you're anti-woke. If you don't like being described as anti-woke when you're anti-woke, then jog on. Honestly, these people. Simon's in Islington. Simon, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. I'm going to try not to repeat what the previous caller has just said, but I'm just very happy to talk to you for the first time.
Likewise.
I feel like the loss of culture for universities like Sheffield Hallam losing their English literature degrees stems back to a Tory ideology about keeping university elitist. And I remember watching things like Panorama and Newsnight with questions about this, and the many Conservative MPs would say, we need to get university back to being elitist and not about the difference between education and training. Yeah. Now, I'm a teacher. I did benefit from Tony Blair's government trying to increase the amount of people that went to university. I came from a low-income family, and I got a lot of my tuition fees paid to go to university. It benefited me. I became a teacher. Great. But I think they want people who went to, say, the lesser universities, someone might say, to a less prestigious course at a less prestigious university. They want rid of that. English lit's not going to disappear.
Why do they want rid of it?
I think you touched on it with the previous caller that they want to keep it elitist. They want their children to go to university, but they don't. But
why do
like
they want? Sorry, I'm going to be like one of your more annoying pupils, Simon. If so, at least you're used to it. Why do they want to do that? Why do they want to limit university access to people like me and not so much people like you, perhaps?
Well, I mean,
what's in it for them? Why do they want to do that?
Well, I don't think they want the plebs like me to go to university. No, I don't.
Why not?
That.
Why? Because you should just be going down the mine or working in the mill and getting on with it.
These are exactly that. I mean, you perhaps have to ask Jacob Rees-Mogg that, and I'd love to talk about him all day. But I think it's keep the plebs down, and then you've got a much happier society for Conservatives.
Take it as all sorts of forms of culture, isn't it? As well, it's this idea that the life of the mind doesn't need to concern hoi polloi. It's you're far too busy keeping the lights on or keeping the country, keeping the production line turning. You don't need to listen to music or read books. You certainly don't need to waste time studying it when you're going to be doing a menial job or whatever it may be. It's a profoundly unpleasant impulse.
Yeah, and it's heartbreaking for me as a teacher in an inner city London school who's desperately trying to get children and young people that wouldn't normally go to university, trying to get those kids with talent to get to university, and it seems that even more avenues are being blocked now.
I think you're right. And listen, we may return to this subject, certainly if other universities go in this direction, although I'm sure I won't need to, because all of the anti-woke lot who think their culture is under threat are going to be up in arms. There'll probably be speeches in the House of Commons later today from Brexit hardman Steve Baker or sundry other great defenders of freedoms and British values, because they're literally suspending the teaching of English literature at an English university. And if that doesn't have them absolutely gnashing their teeth in frustration, I mean, lots more than they would do at the posited possibility of some graffiti appearing possibly one day upon a statue upon which no graffiti has ever appeared. I mean, if that gets them spitting nails, imagine what an English university suspending the teaching of actual English literature is going to do. Whew, it's going to get very heated around here in the months to come, I can tell. If only you could convey sarcasm on the radio. Here's Sheila Fogarty.
Oh, I can.
Well, this is very true. I can confirm.
Easy.
Firm.
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 Easy.